Drug and alcohol use for teens. Bad influences and drugs are everywhere, on the street, in school, and maybe in children's homes. Teens are easily influenced into taking drugs from older people or sometimes even their own classmates. Drugs can hurt you mentally and physically. It can make your relationships with others worse and can hurt you physically. Drugs have a huge impact on the developing mind of a teen. Our brains are still growing, and you could have permanent damage to your brain. You could be taken out of sports or after school clubs. Both ways will hurt you, somebody around you, and it can hurt your future. At my old middle school, there was a group of teens that will abuse drugs and sometimes even alcohol. During a school day, I was walking in the halls and saw an 8th grade student vaping right outside a classroom. He was not trying to hide the fact that he was vaping. He did not hide it because he did not think of the trouble that he would get if he were caught. Not only does this hurt himself, it hurt the environment of the school. This student was setting an awful example for his classmates, the 7th graders, and his own family. They will see this and think this is the right to do. This example will affect many others. This is peer pressure. Teenagers want to fit in and be cool, and sometimes that will get in the way of them making smart decisions that can and will affect their future. There was a party in Norfolk, the town I live in, by the old Norfolk Airport. A group of high schoolers had a party. Taylor Meyer got drunk and wandered off by herself. Nobody knew where she had gone. Everybody was searching for this honor roll student. Police asked students where she might have gone, but they did not know. And they did not speak up because they thought that they were going to get in trouble for underage drinking. The next couple of days went by and she was found dead. She drowned in a small puddle of water around a couple inches deep. She passed out from being drunk and drowned. This all could have been avoided if she was not peer pressured by her own classmates. This had no positive effect on anybody. Her family had and still has sadness. Not only did she die, but about 50 other students were arrested for underage drinking. This completely ruins their chances to get into a good college and get a good job. One thing that I know that would lead to a solution is to have more DARE classes. DARE stands for Drug Abuse Resistance Education. If we can enforce the consequences of how drugs have a bad effect, this would really help. We really need this important message to stick in students' heads. We need some people who have made poor decisions and their consequences to come in and speak. Some people get arrested and this completely ruins their chances of getting into college they want to. Or this can and will ruin your grades. DARE is a really good program and some schools don't have this program. This is something to be taken very seriously and schools should take this into consideration. DARE is a really good program that can save lives. There's a real lack of this in schools. This program only helps, it does not hurt. Do you really want to see your child struggle and be in pain? About 21% of high schoolers say that they've had contact with marijuana in the last month. That is just marijuana. About 39% of high schoolers admit to using drugs. Then 37% of seniors admit to vaping. This is not a minor problem. The problem we are talking about is death, lack of jobs that will affect America, and homelessness. And homelessness can lead to a bunch of other things. Once you go on this path, it is incredibly hard to get off of this path. It is easier just to not start. If you do take this awful path, it will lead to long classes of rehab. And an addiction is very, very hard to overcome. Most people do not come out of rehab and actually go back into drugs. The future of America is at stake. This is so essential to our future, we cannot afford to make the wrong decision. Just because drugs are illegal does not mean at all that people will stop doing drugs. DARE classes are important, but parents and guardians and others can also help out with this situation. It is not enough for us just to have these classes. We need to be forcing these rules around teens. Parents must also set a good example. It doesn't help if a parent is showing a kid how to vape or how to use drugs. If all teens see are drugs and alcohol, then they are going to grow up and think this is all right to do and that it won't hurt them. Most teenagers think that they are invincible. Studies show that children who grow up in homes where drugs are being used, that they are much easier to access to them. Then they start using drugs, which leads to harm. No good, it just leads to harm. This will also set a good example for teens too, if we can completely eliminate drugs. People dealing with drugs could be using them to try to get rid of pain. They could be homeless and feeling depressed. And this looks like the only hope for them. Another situation is in prison. Drugs get smuggled into prison. People who are in prison for using drugs are trying to get clean, trying to get healthy, and try to get out of prison and start their life again. But when they get caught using drugs again, they get more time and they have to start the rehab all over again. They spend many more years in prison instead of coming out and seeing their family or going to college and graduating from high school or even college. They have to start rehab all over again. And then you never know with drugs. The next day, you could die. These are all real-life situations, and they all affect real people. If we teach children the consequences of drugs, they won't end up in prison, homeless, or they won't end up dead due to drugs. Drugs and vaping are real-life problems for our community. Drugs are all over the place and are used by many, many people. Teens are especially vulnerable to those drugs. They hurt our bodies, the environment, and our relationships with others. They are legal, but we also need to do more to stop drugs. People are in pain, and they feel like the only way out is drugs. We also need to inform that there are other ways to deal with addiction. Drugs can really mess up your life, and you cannot finish high school and never get a job. Once you get your diploma, you can keep your diploma. You're not going to lose it. But this can all be stopped if we inform kids about this in high school. It is much more efficient to tell kids and keep them off of drugs than later down the road having to go through 6 months of rehab and enforcing these rules. Enforcing these rules should be a part of our regular day-to-day lives. We are talking about the future of America, and this has to be taken very, very seriously.